Okay, we are going to hop into it. It's 9:30. So we'll just get it going and people will probably join over the next few minutes.
Sounds great.
Awesome. What is up, everyone? This is Alex Lieberman, co-founder and CEO of Morning Brew, here with Nir Eyal. I am so pumped for this conversation. More than 6,000 of you decided to attend this virtual event. I think that is the most signups we've ever had for an event at Morning Brew. And I am very confident that at the end of this, you will feel really good about the decision to take 45 minutes out of your morning on a Friday to join. And selfishly, this event is happening because I need it more than anyone. I'm busier than ever before. Work is more exciting than ever before, yet I feel more distracted and at times more unproductive than ever before. And I have found that remote work doesn't necessarily help with this problem. So that is why I decided it was time to consult the guru of attention, time management, and productivity, Nir Eyal. Nir has done it all. He's a successful entrepreneur, successful author, successful teacher at Stanford. And most importantly for this group, Nir has spent the last 10 years researching distraction and productivity and built a world-class framework to hack back attention and supercharge your own productivity. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce a friend of the brew, a friend of mine, Nir Eyal. Nir, it's so great to be chatting with you this morning. How's it going? Where are you calling from?
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here. It's a real honor and a pleasure. And I'm psyched that so many people signed up for this. Although I have to say, I am not surprised because we live in very, very distracting times. So it's great for everyone joining us. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm eager to dive in. I can't wait to share what I've been spending the past decade researching, and hopefully you'll find it beneficial.
Awesome. So before hopping into the conversation, I just want to give everyone listening a lay of the land. There are going to be three parts of the conversation, and we've designed this to be as effective and efficient as possible, while also giving ample time for everyone watching to ask questions and have actionable takeaways. So first, we're going to have Nir run through his decades worth of research in 15 minutes, no pressure at all, and tell us the biggest takeaways on all things attention, distraction, and productivity. Second, we're going to have Nir do an Alex Lieberman teardown, the Alex Lieberman special. I'm going to share my way of working, give you all and Nir a glimpse into my calendar and what I'm doing today in work, and then have Nir offer recommendations for being a better worker, which I'm sure there are going to be plenty of recommendations. And then third, we're going to open it to a Q&A so that you all can apply Nir's framework to your own life. In order to ask questions, you're going to see a form for asking them. You can just click it and submit your questions in the form, and I'm going to be taking as many as I can at the end of this conversation. And finally, we have a special announcement that no one else knows about yet. We're going to make the announcement before my way of working audit. So make sure you stick around. It's really exciting. Let's hop into it. Nir, let's start at the beginning. Give me 10 years and 15 minutes.
Sure, I'll do my best. Well, I'll start with the most recent chapter of my life. I've helped start two companies, and after my second company was acquired, I had some time on my hands, and I decided to dive deep into the research around how to build habit-forming products. And in fact, my first book was called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And the idea was to understand how companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp and Snapchat, how are they built to get you hooked? And the reason I wrote the book was not for their benefit. I wrote it for entrepreneurs and investors and designers out there that are looking to make the kind of products and services that build healthy habits in people's lives. And that's exactly what's happened since my first book was published. Now, in the process of teaching at Stanford about how to build habit-forming products, I also acquired a lot of knowledge around how to break bad habits. So if Hooked is about building good habits, then Indistractable is about how do we break these bad habits. But the story of how I came to write Indistractable came from a problem I had in my own life. That I remember there was this particular instance that really made me reassess my own relationship with distraction. A few years ago, I had some time with my daughter, and we had this beautiful afternoon planned. And I remember we had this book of activities that daddies and daughters could do together. And there's all kinds of games you could play in the book, all kinds of different activities. But one of the activities was to ask each other this question, that if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question verbatim, but I cannot tell you what my daughter said. Because in that moment, I decided it was a good time to just check this one thing on my phone real quick, honey. And my daughter got the message that whatever was on my screen was more important than she was. And by the time I glanced up from my phone, she'd left the room and she decided to go play with some toy outside. And I'd realized that I had completely blown it. And if I'm honest with you, Alex, it didn't just happen with my daughter. It would happen when I was at work and I would say I was going to work on that big project. And yet somehow 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, doing everything but that project I said I was going to work on. It would happen when I would say to myself, hey, I got to go exercise today and I got to hit the gym. And I wouldn't. I have to eat healthily, but I didn't. And so I became fascinated with this amazing question that still intrigues me today is, why is it that when we know what to do, why don't we just do it? Right? Because today the problem is not that we don't know what to do. Who doesn't basically know how to get in shape or how to be better at their job, right? Just do the work, especially the hard stuff that people don't want to do, or how to have better relationships, be fully present with people. We know this stuff. And frankly, if you don't know it, what's your excuse? Google it. Everybody can just Google the answers to know how to do something they don't know how to do. I would argue that we are drowning in information. We have way too much information. What we don't have enough of is an understanding of how to get out of our own way. How do we stop getting distracted? And so that's why, if you ask me today, what superpower I would most want, I would tell you I want the power to become indistractable. And so that's why I started this journey to understand the deeper psychology of why we get distracted, not just the surface level tips and tricks and life hacks, the silly stuff that everybody's heard a million times before. Get rid of the technology or turn off your apps or grayscale your phone. We've heard all that stuff. It doesn't work. You know what else doesn't work? Digital detoxes and digital minimalism. I've tried all that stuff. It doesn't work unless you understand the deeper psychology of why we get distracted, not just because of our technologies, but how we get distracted by all sorts of things. And so it was that seminal moment that put me down this path to understand a solution that I could use in my own life. And so that's where I came up with this 4-part framework that I talk about in the book that really helps you understand not just the tactics, right? Tactics are cheap, right? All the life hacks and the tips and tricks, that stuff is cheap. What's much more important than the tactics are the strategies. Tactics are what we do. Strategies are why we do it. And when we implement these 4 parts of the indistractable model, we can all become indistractable. We can make sure that we can get the best out of these technologies without letting them get the best of us. We can do what we say we're going to do. We can be as honest with ourselves as we are with other people by becoming indistractable.
Well, now that you have perfectly teased this fantasy world of being indistractable and doing work with purpose and with intention, and now as I think about this in my own work, just thinking about like how much we overcomplicate the simple things. Like, to your point, it is so simple in theory, doing what we say we're going to do, yet we somehow find every way possible not to do it. So can you pull back the curtain a little bit and tell me why I don't do the things I say I'm going to do?
Yes, absolutely. So let's dive right in. So the best place to start is to understand, what is distraction exactly? We use this word. What is it exactly? We think we understand it, but let's challenge that a bit. The best way to understand distraction is to understand what is the opposite of distraction. So if you ask most people and you say, what's the opposite of distraction? Most people will say it's focus. But that's not exactly right. That the opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. That if you look at the origin of both words, they both come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll also notice that they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you're going to do, things that you do with intent, things that help you move towards your values and become the kind of person you want to become. Now, the opposite of traction is distraction. any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, anything that is not done with intent, that pulls you away from your values and pulls you away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is really important for two reasons. Okay. Number one, any action can be a distraction. Let me ask you if this sounds familiar. This is something I used to do all the time before I discovered how to become indistractable. I would sit down at my desk in the morning and I'd say, okay, here I go. I've got this big project that I haven't done that I got to get going on. I got to finish that RFP. I got to finish those slides, whatever that big project that I'm working on. I got to get started. I'm not going to procrastinate. Nothing's going to distract me. Here I go. I'm going to get to work right now. But first, let me check some email, right? First, let me just scroll that Slack channel, or let me do that one thing on my to-do list that is easy to do. So let me just do that first to get some momentum going, right? And what I didn't realize is that is the most dangerous form of distraction, because that is the kind of distraction that tricks you into prioritizing the easy and the urgent at the expense of the important. And that is death to your productivity, your well-being, your psychological, your physical health. If you don't even understand when you're getting distracted because you're allowing your brain to trick itself into saying, oh, I'm working on emails. That's important. That's a work-related task. And it's taking you away from the thing you plan to do. You are just as distracted as if you were playing a video game or scrolling Facebook. So anything can be a distraction. And then conversely, anything can be traction. So I am not one of these chicken little tech critics that is a professor up in some ivory tower who doesn't even have a social media account telling you, stop using technology, right? Technology is evil. It's melting your brain. It's addicting everyone. It's hijacking our minds. That is rubbish, right? Number one, it's impractical. How many of us can just stop using email? We can't. We need it for our livelihoods. We'll get fired from our jobs if we stop using this technology. And number two, we don't have to stop using this technology, because anything you use with intent is traction. So if you want to play a video game, great. You want to scroll Facebook or watch a video on Netflix, do it. I want you to do it. But I'm going to teach you how to do it on your schedule, not someone else's. The difference between traction and distraction in any form is one word. And that one word is forethought. Okay. So now we have traction, we have distraction. Now you ask, well, what makes us get distracted? We have two things, two triggers. We have external triggers and we have internal triggers. External triggers are all the usual suspects, the pings, the dings, the rings, all of the things in our outside environment that can lead us to traction or distraction. Now we can talk about how do you hack back those external triggers in a bit, but I want to talk about the leading cause of distraction. And this kind of blew my mind when I discovered this, that I wanted to blame all the external triggers. But when you look at time studies, what you find is that the number one source of distraction, the root cause of why we procrastinate, why we get distracted, why we don't do what we say we're going to do, has not much to do with what's going on outside of us, but rather has everything to do with what is going on inside of us. These are called internal triggers. And it turns out that the root cause of distraction and procrastination, it's not a character flaw. There's nothing wrong with you. It's simply that we don't have the tools to deal with this discomfort in a healthy way that leads us towards traction rather than distraction. So what do internal triggers look like? It's loneliness, uncertainty, fatigue, stress, anxiety, any of these sensations that cause us to look for relief, that cause us to look for some kind of escape from that emotional discomfort. So whether it's too much news, right, to think about somebody else's problems halfway around the world so we don't have to think about what's going on in our own life, whether it's too much booze, right, to not have to feel what we don't want to feel, too much football, too much Facebook, too much anything, all of this comes down to the same root cause of not having the habits of mind to deal with that discomfort in a healthy manner. And so that's where we have to start, is mastering those internal triggers. And then we just work our way around. We start with mastering the internal triggers, then we make time for traction, we hack back the external triggers, and we prevent distraction with packs. So those are the 4 big strategies that anyone can implement to become indistractable.
Wow. I think you just successfully broke down your 10 years of research in, I think it was actually 12 minutes. So that was impressive.
Excellent.
Okay. So I get this concept of traction and distraction being pulled towards my values or being pulled away from my values, and understanding what creates distraction are these internal triggers, like the feeling of loneliness, anxiety, stress, the external triggers like my Slack blowing up right now or my phone getting a ping. But I guess I want to get a little bit more tangible to my life, because my brain's starting to swirl with thinking about just like how many dozens of times these triggers are occurring in a day, and I'm not aware of it. I think one of the points that you made is such a valid one, which is like, it's almost a slow bleed, because I'm not realizing that things are distractions when they're actually distractions. And so if I don't realize it, they will just continue to happen and snowball. So what I'd love to do is just walk you through how I work, and basically have you coach me through what I can be trying to do to hack back my attention to have more traction in what I'm doing versus distraction.
Love it. Let's do it. That sounds great. And we should say before you dive in, so I gave you the summary. It actually took me 10 years to get there, between looking at all the different research, knowing what to include, what to exclude. By the way, there is so many myths out there. I mean, a lot of what I teach is myth busting, right? Stuff like to-do lists. I don't want to incriminate you. We might get to this based on how you work. Most people don't realize that a lot of the dogma out there around productivity is horrible. Starting with to-do lists, right? Did you know that to-do lists actually destroy your productivity? We can talk about why they're so bad in just a minute, but I don't want to take us off track.
No, we're not off track, and I'm just preparing myself mentally to be embarrassed in front of thousands of people.
I'll be easy on you. It's okay.
Sounds good. And also, before we get into my way of working, for anyone that's just joining, we have a question form for everyone on the Twitch stream. So if you want to ask questions, that's going to be the final part of our conversation in about 15 minutes. Please feel free to ask questions, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as we can. We're also going to be making a special announcement after this part around a partnership between Near and Morning Brew. So really excited for that. Stick around for that. But without further ado, we are going to step into Alex's world. So
let's do it.
My way of working. First and foremost, you alluded to it, but I am the to-do lister. Whether it be using Post-it notes, notebooks. Sometimes I literally take individual pieces of printer paper from a printer and just write my lists on there. I basically list everything that I want to get done in a day, and I think my feeling is that it allows me to prioritize the most important things. And also, if I'm able to scratch all of the things off that list, then haven't I done what I said I was going to do? And so, for example, I just wrote out my to-do list for the day. So I had one was this webinar. The second was 4 or 5 phone calls that I have scheduled in the afternoon today. I have another being setting up my weekly LinkedIn Live CMO series. And then one other is completing my Q3 goals. So at Morning Brew, every senior leader at the company sets quarterly goals. And we're about at that point in the quarter, we're setting goals for the next quarter. So that's something on my to-do list as well. So those are the big 4 things on my to-do list, where if I get those done, I will feel accomplished. So I guess before moving on to my other ways of working, you already alluded to this, that this is like exactly how I shouldn't be working, but I don't get why, given if I get these things done, I will feel accomplished. Tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So, there is some nuance here. I'm not anti-writing things down, right? That's a great strategy, getting them out of your brain. I know a lot of people have read Getting Things Done by David Allen, and he's absolutely right. You got to get that stuff out of your brain and put it somewhere tangible. What I don't like, and what people misinterpret this technique, is that they run their day with a to-do list. That's the mistake. If you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, what should I do right now? I'm going to use a to-do list. That's what I want to rally against, because the research shows that it's actually a very damaging practice. Even though people think it's making them productive because they've read a book that told them to do it, it actually really doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you what to do instead here in just a minute. But let me ask you a question here, Alex. You've kept to-do lists for a while now, I assume, right?
Yep.
When was the last time that you used the technique you just described? You wrote down everything you wanted to do in a day, and you did not finish everything on your to-do list. When was the last time that happened?
I mean, that is that is 100% of the time. And if not 100%, maybe I'm 1 for 100 in actually finishing the to-do list. And I actually read 4 of the things on the list here, but there were 2 others I had as well. But my assumption was just that those 4 hopefully will get done, but the other 2 will kind of just be on the back burner. So yeah, I mean, I never get everything done on the to-do list.
Yeah.
And I just assume that's part of to-do lists.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So I took a little bit of a risk here asking you this question because I didn't know how you'd respond. But let me tell you, I have actually never heard a different response. Whenever I ask people, and I did a lot of research over the past, almost decade here on this topic, and I ask people, when was the last time you finished anything on your to-do list? Because I used to keep to-do lists, and I never finished everything on my to-do list. And somehow we accept this. But let me ask you, if a to-do list is about doing your to-dos and you're not finishing your to-dos, isn't the tactic broken, right? Isn't it not working? If we say this magic formula of just put things on a to-do list and they're going to get done yields finishing those to-dos. If we're not finishing them, maybe we should take a step back and we'd be like, hey, wait, is this actually working for us? Is this technique any good? And so let me just talk about for a minute why I think to-do lists actually backfire. And they backfire for a few reasons. Again, I'm not anti-writing down the things that you need to accomplish. I'm against running your day based on those to-do lists. Because number one, when you don't finish everything on your to-do list, which is endemic to this practice, there's a few really bad things that happen. Number one, you are shaping your self-image. Okay, we know the research tells us that behavior change is identity change. So any self-image that you reinforce day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, begins to take hold. You begin to believe your self-image. And so what happens when you don't finish what you say you're going to do? Right? We're telling ourselves that we are the kind of people who don't do what they say they are going to accomplish. We are not living with personal integrity. And then, of course, it becomes okay, because now it's okay if like, I didn't finish everything on my to-do list. I didn't go work out. I don't need to spend that time with my kid. It's okay. I can skip. I'll wait till tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that. And so this process of what a to-do list perpetuates, of rolling tasks over from one day to the next, is horrible for our productivity because it degrades our self-image as someone who does what they say they're going to do, someone who is indistractable. The second thing I think it's really that it does is that even when we have leisure time, okay, even when you have time in your day, you just come home from work and you want to watch Netflix, you want to just hang out and talk to your partner or hang out with your kids and just relax. If you're anything like I used to be, I have a mile-long to-do list that I would never finish. In the back of my mind, when I wanted to relax, was all the stuff I didn't do, right? All the unfinished tasks. And so even when I want to relax, I'm half thinking about all the stuff that still needs to get done, and I couldn't even enjoy the leisure time in my day. So, and the third thing that I think is evil about to-do lists is that most people, almost everyone who uses a to-do list, we default to doing the easy rather than the important. You know what this looks like? I haven't had my cup of coffee yet. Okay, what am I going to do on that to-do list? You know what? Let me just do that easy stuff. And we keep delaying and procrastinating and getting distracted from the stuff that is the most important things to do. So those are 3 really good reasons. I hope I've made the case effectively around why to-do lists suck. What do we do instead? Okay, what's the replacement? The replacement is a technique that has been studied in thousands of peer-reviewed studies. This is not just my research. Thousands of peer-reviewed studies have found this technique that's called making an implementation intention, which is just a fancy way of saying planning out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Because here's the rule. Okay, listen carefully, folks. Write this down if you can. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if you start your day with a big empty calendar, even if you have that list of to-dos, if your calendar is blank, right? Maybe you have a meeting or a dentist appointment, but if the vast majority of your working day is empty, what did you get distracted from? Everything is a distraction if you don't know how you wanted to plan your day. And so the only way to know the difference between traction and distraction for every minute of your day is to plan ahead. So that's why we want to use a technique that I talk about in the book called keeping a time-boxed calendar. Now, a time box calendar, what we're going to do is we're going to take those things that you want to do and immediately put them into our calendar. Okay. We're going to make time for those tasks in your calendar. So for example, working on those next quarter goals.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to put that time in our calendar. Now, the biggest difference between how we measure ourselves with the to-do list and how we measure ourselves with a time box calendar is that with the to-do list, we only measure our worth if we accomplish a task based on whether we finished. Okay, but here's the problem, once again, with to-do lists. People are horrible at predicting how long a task will take. You know this, right? We're really bad at this. And it's not just you, it's not just me. Everybody, study after study has found that we are horrible at predicting how long things will take us to finish because many times we don't know how complex they are. If they rely on other people, well, I need the slides from Jenny, I need the numbers from Bill. Like this stuff has contingencies that will take longer than we expect. So the new metric of success here, Alex, is not did you finish? Okay. The new metric of success is, did I work on the task for as long as I said I would without distraction? That's your only metric of success. Did I work on the task for as long as I said I would without distraction? And so if you say, I'm going to budget an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, doesn't matter. Did you work on that task for as long as you said you would without distraction? And it turns out that people who do this for their day, and I teach you exactly how to do this. We need more time to teach you exactly how to do it. But when you do this, it turns out that people who use this technique are actually more productive than the people who use the to-do list. They actually are better at finishing everything they want to accomplish than the people who measure themselves based on how much stuff they finished in their day.
Super interesting. And, one thing that really resonates with me there is I think what I fall victim to more than anything is when I have a to-do list, one of the reasons that I don't get through the full to-do list is because I have the thing that I prioritize first. And then I end up spending 8 hours on that thing because there are no boundaries to how much time I'm going to spend on it. And so what I end up finding myself do is literally getting through 1 or 2 things on the to-do list because I've spent my entire day on those 1 or 2 things. And so I think this concept or strategy of time boxing basically holds me accountable to myself, where these are actually the most important 5 things that I will be spending time that I say I'm going to spend on those 5 things without basically forgetting about 4 of them. And so I think that makes a ton of sense.
Absolutely. And so the reason that time boxing works so much better than to-do lists is that it forces you to operate under constraints, that we know that to get our best work out of ourselves, we need constraints, that constraints help us do better work. And so it's too easy to just put stuff on the to-do list and keep adding and adding and adding. You can add forever. Whereas when you have a time box calendar, you have the same 24 hours in your day. Right? Alex, we call it paying attention for a reason. We pay attention just like we would pay with money, right? And you wouldn't stand on a corner and give anybody who wants it all of your money and say, oh, here's a 20, here's a 10, here's 100. We wouldn't just give money out. And yet somehow we give out our attention to whoever wants it. Our boss wants it. Our kids want it. Oh my God, did you see what just happened on Twitter? They want it. We give our attention. We pay attention to whatever, as opposed to asking ourselves in advance, how do we want to spend our time and attention? Because that is our most precious resource. And it's something that you have just as much of as anybody else on the face of the earth, right? So it doesn't matter how much money you have. Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos have just as much time in the day as we do. And so that's why it's a limited and precious commodity that we have to make sure that we use appropriately.
Absolutely. And I think you've mentioned it in your writing before, but I think this is something that like Seneca talked about all the time, which is the idea of that like people guard so many things or so protective over so many things in life, yet the thing that is most valuable and most scarce, we don't protect at all. And I think once people's mindset shifts to understanding how protective we should be of our time is, like truly understanding that meaning, I think it changes the way they work entirely. One last thing I want to do before moving on to the Q&A is I just want to paint a final picture on my work situation and just pick one thing to basically be like, Alex, what are you doing here? So in addition to having to-do lists, my typical day. So right now I'm actually in my girlfriend's family's home. Typically I'm working in the main room, like in the kitchen in their family's home. I have my phone next to me. It is on. Slack is open. I have iMessage on my computer. I have a cup of coffee next to me. And specifically today, I normally work out in the morning, but I felt stressed about working out and then rushing to this. So my goal is at some point during the day today, I'm going to get a workout done. How should I be thinking about this setup? My
Yeah,
stack.
yeah. So this is why strategy beats tactics. So I could tell you lots of tactics, turn off Slack, do this, do that. I could tell you lots of tactics, but it's really about a holistic approach. Because you're not going to solve this problem of distraction, which by the way, you mentioned Seneca. I talk about how there are there's Plato talked about this very same problem 2,500 years ago. The ancient Greek philosophers talked about the problem of distraction way before Facebook and Twitter and the iPhone, right? These technologies did not create distraction. This is an age-old human problem, and it requires a deeper understanding of the human psyche to solve it. There is no magic bullet for this problem of distraction. It's plagued mankind forever. The good news is that we understand what gets us distracted like never before. And so that's why the first place to start is really understanding the internal triggers. It's really working our way through these 4 steps. Each one of these 4 steps, that you can easily say the strategy, but of course the tactics is what takes the work, right? That's where we actually implement this in our life. Right. But doing something as simple as understanding what are those internal triggers? Why is it that if I say I'm going to work on that project right now, I'm going to finish my 3rd quarter goals, and yet I start doing that for 5 minutes, and then I have this urge to check Slack, or let me just check email real quick. Sometimes those are external triggers, and we can hack those back easily. There's a lot of things we can do about that. But many times those things those distractions originate from internal triggers, right? I'm anxious, I'm fearful, I'm uncertain. How do I deal with that discomfort? Not in a way that makes me escape what I'm feeling, but actually helps me utilize that discomfort as rocket fuel to help move me towards traction as opposed to distraction. One of the, I think, another myth in the self-help community these days is that feeling bad is bad. Right? How many books tell us that we're supposed to be happy all the time? We're supposed to be contented always. And I'm here to tell you that is just silly, right? That evolution did not make us in such a way to be happy and satisfied all the time. If there was ever a group of Homo sapiens that was always happy and contented, our ancestors probably killed and ate them. Right? Because that would not be a beneficial trait for the species to have. And so we want to harness that discomfort. A species that is perpetually perturbed is one that creates and invents and innovates. And so many people out there listening right now, the entrepreneurs, the inventors, the creators, you want to harness that discomfort. You want to use that anxiety, the uncertainty, the fearfulness. You want to use it to drive you forward towards traction, as opposed to constantly letting it drive you off track because you can't handle that discomfort. So that has to be the very first place to start. And then we start working through these other steps. After we master the internal triggers, we make time for traction. We make sure that we've budgeted the right time in our day. We synchronize our schedules. So this is a big concern. A lot of people say, hey, okay, I got it. I'm going to be indistractable. But what happens if my boss is not indistractable? What happens if I'm in the client services business and I constantly need to be on call because I'm a salesperson, or I'm in customer service and I work on a distributed team? Yeah, I get it. I've heard all the objections. And let me tell you, there is a systematic approach to deal with every single one of these barriers.
Awesome. Well, my takeaway from this is the landline
external trigger.
The external trigger. My takeaway is that inevitably at some point today, I'm going to be working on my Q3 rocks, my Q3 goals, and I'm going to see in the bottom right hand of my computer, Slack turn from like the little circular red dot to the number 1 or 2 or 3, and it is going to get me to click on it. And I think, to your point, it's not just thinking about, okay, let me just turn off Slack, because there's always going to be a next Slack. There's always going to be a next phone, a next Facebook. The question is what is it that actually got me to click that button? Potentially that was internal. And so that's something I'm going to think about. But I think this is a perfect segue to the next part of our conversation, but specifically the announcement that we have, because there's actually an opportunity to dive into these things in a more meaningful manner now. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a special announcement because of my own love-hate relationship with attention, distraction, and traction. And Morning Brew's audience's deep interest in productivity, time management, and value-based working, Near and Morning Brew decided to co-create an intensive 2-week workshop to get you feeling amazing about your way of working. The workshop is exclusively for Morning Brew readers. So only if you're a Morning Brew reader are you going to have access to this course. So you get to meet many other readers as well who are incredibly ambitious, aspirational, but also feel distracted in their life, in work, at home, with family as well. So by the end of the workshop, you will have a toolkit for planning ahead, controlling your attention, and supercharging your productivity. And at minimum, you will hack back an hour of your day that had been wasted being distracted or spending time on the wrong things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to drop a link to the workshop in the comments. And then we're also going to send a link to it in the post-event email. If you have any questions, you'll be able to ask questions about the course, but we're super excited about it. It's going to be limited to a certain number of seats because we want it to be a really intimate experience where students have access to Near and they have access to one another. So if this is something that interests you, and if what you've heard in this discussion feels like the crystal key to you moving towards traction, I implore you to check out the link and to sign up. Now onto the Q&A. So Tony from our team has been super helpful in sending questions, and there are 50 plus of them right now. So I'm going to take a quick look and we're going to try to dive into as many as we can.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Just to add to a bit to what you said, Alex, about the course, we really, we know that the Morning Brew audience is a very high caliber audience. And so we wanted to make sure that people have the opportunity to interact with each other because look, distraction is a universal problem. So many of us struggle with distraction. I know I certainly did. And I've never been the kind of person that has a lot of willpower or self-control. That has never been me. I actually used to be clinically obese at one point in my life because I struggled with self-control. And the good news is that you don't need a lot of self-control and willpower. That is not the answer. The answer is a system in place that helps you become indistractable. So I know these techniques work. They're not only my pet project. This is stuff that, there's over 30 pages of citations in my book. And I cite a lot of research that went into this methodology that's backed by peer-reviewed studies. And it works, right? And these techniques really do work. This is something that I use in my own life and I have for the past 5 years. I'm in the best shape of my life at age 42. I have a better relationship with my wife of 18 years than ever before. I'm more productive at work than I've ever been because I use this system that anybody can implement to become indistractable. And so we wanted to incorporate this live element. This isn't just some video course that everybody does on their own whenever they want. We're doing this together. We're doing this as a cohort. And so you will be placed in a study group with other high caliber people who have the exact same struggle that you do. And you're going to have an opportunity to discuss the lessons in the course, to find ways to implement this into your own life, share strategies, learn from each other, connect with each other. And I think you're going to find it to be incredibly beneficial.
I honestly can't wait to take the course myself. It is a co-created course, but I am going to be student one because as I said in the beginning, I think there's so much opportunity for me to both set the values and the intentions of what I want to do in my life, but actually do them, but understand, aside from the tactics and the external triggers, what it truly is that is driving me to not do the things I'm saying I'm going to do. And this has been something that has created anxiety for me in my life since freshman year of college. Since freshman year of college, I have said to myself that I don't do as much as I say I want to do. And candidly, what it leads me to doing is working probably or spending time working far more than I need to, and even spending time on the weekends in order to make up for being distracted. So without further ado, there are a lot of questions. We're gonna try hitting on some of them. So I'm sure this is one that you have gotten a lot. Near, what is your take on multitasking? How does it relate to distraction?
Yeah, this is a good one. So again, there's so much of my research is overturning conventional answers. And so I know what you're expecting me to say. You're expecting me to say, you can't multitask. We've all heard that. Haven't we heard that a bajillion times? How many articles have you read why you can't multitask? I'm here to tell you that's not true. You can multitask. Of course you can multitask. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Who says you can't multitask? What you can't do is you can't have input on the same channel at the same time. So there's a big difference here. For example, you can't listen to two podcasts, one in each ear, and understand what's happening in both. You can't do two math problems at the same time. You can't watch two television shows at the same time and keep up with the storyline. That we can't do. You can only bring in one source of sensory input at a time, but you can absolutely multi-channel multitask. And so I talk about this, and we're going to talk about this in the course, and I talk about it a bit in the book, about how you can actually use a technique called temptation bundling, which is when we take one reward from something and we use it as motivation to help us do something we don't really want to do. Let me tell you how I apply this in my life. So I had this problem where I would go online and I would see an interesting article, right? I would get something in the morning Brew newsletter and I would say, oh, that's a great article. I need to read it. And then I'd click over to the link and it would take me to the New York Times or to the Atlantic or to some story somewhere. And those websites are designed to suck you in, right? They make their money monetizing your eyeballs. That's how they make their money. And so the more of these headlines I would read one, and then, that looks like an interesting story. And I'll read another one, and I'll read another one. And then 30, 45 minutes later, I've been reading stories on the internet as opposed to doing what I said I was going to do with my time, right? And so I don't do that anymore. Now I use this wonderful app called Pocket, and I have it installed on my phone. And the way it works is every time I see an article online, my rule is I save it to my Pocket app. And then I only can digest those articles in a specific context. My reward for going on a walk or going to the gym is that I get to look at these Pocket articles, but not just look at them. I don't read them. The Pocket app actually has a text-to-speech feature. So it will actually read the articles to you. So not only do I save the time not having to scroll away on the internet, reading article after article and wasting all that time, I'm using it as an incentive to help get me to go take a walk or go to the gym. So that's what we call multi-channel multitasking, where I'm listening to articles as I'm exercising or taking a walk while I'm making a phone call or spending some time with a friend while cooking dinner. So you can absolutely multitask. It's about multi-channel multitasking.
And it sounds like bundling the reward with the intended action, where you are rewarding yourself for not getting distracted and reading articles, but reserving it for a time where you've said you're going to do it. Attaching the reward to that action is really important.
Right. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't really like working out in the gym, but that's my place to consume these cool articles. So that becomes the reward for going to the gym.
Awesome. So we're going to try taking 2 or 3 more questions. The next is,
sure.
Someone asked, can we use both a to-do list and the Timebox calendar together? In other words, is it effective to first plan with a to-do list for a list of objectives, then once finished with making the to-do list, transfer to a calendar to begin execution?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So again, I'm not anti-writing things down. I'm anti-running your life by a to-do list, right? Most people who use a to-do list, they wake up in the morning and when they ask themselves, what should I do? They say, okay, what's got to get done today? Let me look at that to-do list and I'll start checking things off the box. Let me do the easy stuff first. Let me save the hard stuff for never. And that's why they don't do what they say they're going to do. And they don't accomplish the important things. They just do the urgent and the easy. So absolutely, what we're going to do is we are going to keep, there's nothing wrong with keeping a register of things, right? So I have time in my calendar for admin tasks when it's all the little stuff that takes, 5 minutes here, calling the internet company or, I don't know, like small little tasks that take just a little bit of time. You can put those together into an admin time. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to have this big, long, endless to-do list of all these big goals, finish my novel or, these big tasks that are multi-part tasks. It's because, look, success with anything in life is about consistency over intensity. Okay. Consistency over intensity, whether you want to get in shape, whether you want to have good relationships, whether you want to be great at your job. It's about consistency, not intensity, not, that person who comes in after they make their New Year's resolution and works out really hard for a couple weeks. No, the person who gets in shape is the person who's in the gym 5 days a week, week after week after week, 52 weeks a year, right? And the same with our work. So I have dedicated time in my calendar for that focused work that I know needs to get done. So that's where I would put the time for these tasks, like, okay, finishing my quarterly goals, things like that. That time is reserved. It's in my calendar, it's called focus work time. It's called that time for reflective work. And I hold that time and I keep it precious. Now, some of that time in your schedule will also be time for predictable tasks, for example, like checking email, right? That part of the problem with email, part of the reason that email is the mother of habit forming technology, is that we use it whenever we feel bad, right? When you're uncertain, check email. When you're stressed, check email. When you're anxious, check email. Email will tell you what to do next. And if you run your life like that, you're only responding to urgency and not to the things that are actually important. So what we want to do, we want to time box that time for email as well. And then I'm going to show you in the course, how do you adjust your calendar? Because, the part of the problem with time boxing is that it seems to people like it's a very difficult thing to start. Oh, I got to make a calendar. That's so rigid. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I got to be spontaneous. And really what that is, let me be honest with you, because I experienced this myself. That's just the fear of having to do the work talking, right? That's what that is, because it actually takes very little time. It's about 15 minutes. You can set up your own time box calendar. I show you how to turn your values into time, and not just for the work related tasks, for also the fun tasks, right? I want you to play video games if that's what you like doing. I want you to watch Netflix movies if that's part of your values. I want you to spend time with your friends, and I'm going to show you how to make sure that you can live out your values in all these domains of your life.
I think it's such an important point you make, which is you're not telling people to not make a list of things or write on a piece of paper. The issue is when you make this endless list of things, and then your calendar or your intended time working isn't sunk up with those things. So really starting in this holistic manner where you call it like your values-based approach, and which you'll talk about in the course, but this idea of the things you writing down being your values, and then how you translate that to your way of working. So you give enough love and time to the things you say you're going to do, but also where as long as you spend time on the things you say you're going to spend time on, that is success. I think it is a really important shift in mentality. We are a few minutes over, so I'm going to ask one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. And I think this is probably a question that everyone wonders and potentially is like, Nir, I get this time box thing, but I don't understand how this works with other people. Like, we live in a dynamic world. So the question is, how do you work this out when you have a boss who hijacks chunks of your time every day to do what they want you to do rather than what you have planned to do? My boss thinks everything is a fire that needs to be put out. What do you do about time hijacking?
Yes. This is such a good question, because, we can become indistractable ourselves, but if we work in a company that has the kind of culture that does not respect and appreciate people's time and attention, well, then that becomes very difficult, right? So what we have to do, and there's a few things, and we're going to talk about this at length in the course as well. It's in my book as well. But what we're going to talk about is, one, how do we change company culture? It turns out that no matter where you are in the hierarchy, you can actually affect change in the company. I talk about companies who have made this cultural shift. I talk about, for example, the Boston Consulting Group. I used to work there. This was my first job out of college. I used to work at this very high stress, always on culture. And I document how they actually changed from this terrible workplace that had very high employee turnover. Now they're one of America's best places to work because they have changed their company culture to respect people's time and attention and become indistractable. So there are things we can do on a company-wide level to affect change, even if we're not the big boss. But there's also some things that we can do to manage our managers. Let me start with yet another myth to bust here. We've all read productivity articles that tell us that the secret to being more productive is to tell people no, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Learn how to say no. That is the stupidest advice. You're going to tell your boss, the person who cuts your checks, you're going to tell them, oh, no, thanks. I'm okay. I don't want to do that. Come on, who the heck writes this stuff? That's horrible advice. This is what's written, the kind of advice that a professor that's never had a real job gives to people who actually work in the real world. You can't just tell your boss no. So what do you do instead? What you do is you do what's called a schedule sync. Okay, and we're going to talk about this at length in the course, but a schedule sync is essentially after you have made your time box calendar. Now you have a physical artifact. You have something that you can show other people. All the stakeholders in your life, whether it's your partner, your husband, your wife, or your boss, you can sit down with them and say, okay, look, boss, okay, here's my schedule for the week. Okay. By the way, this takes 10 minutes a week, 10 minutes a week. Sit down with your boss Monday morning and say, okay, boss, here's my schedule for the week. I put out how I'm going to spend all my time this week based on the priorities that I have on my plate right now. Now you see this other piece of paper. On this other piece of paper, I wrote down all the stuff that I couldn't find time for in my calendar, but can you help me reprioritize? Okay. So now you're not saying no to your boss. You're having your boss be the one that says no to this task or that task. And every time you do this, you will be amazed how doing this schedule sync, you will percolate stuff up that your boss will say, actually, you know what, that thing on the piece of paper, that's actually way more important than that thing you have in your calendar. Let's swap that out. Your boss is desperate for visibility into your calendar. Anybody who's ever had employees will tell you that when you have employees, you're kind of guessing what they're doing all day. Your
100%.
boss will worship the ground you walk on if you just do this schedule sync once a week. And then they don't constantly have to tap you on the shoulder because they know, oh, okay, boss, I have this reflective work time. So you see, that's when I'm going to be indistractable from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's going to be my time to do my work, that when I can't be disturbed. But hey, from this time to this time, I'm available. You can come see me anytime you want. Of course, I'm here for you. So doing that schedule sync is an incredibly effective way to get on the same page around your calendar.
Awesome. And I know we're going to dive into this a ton in the course, but I think what's really interesting to acknowledge is that there's this halo effect of not only does schedule syncing allow you to work on the things you say you're going to work on, while also taking into consideration the things that your boss or manager wants you to work on. But there's the halo effect of this activity in itself shows that you're proactive, shows that you want to be collaborative, shows that you're transparent. Like, it is the best possible thing that an employee can do for a manager.
That's absolutely right.
I think it's fantastic advice. This was awesome. We are 7 minutes over. But I think every minute was worth it. I hope that everyone enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday, Nir, as well as everyone who joined this event. I hope you found it insightful and actionable so you can continue to operate with more purpose and focus in your own life. I also want to thank Nir for helping to guide the conversation and give us all a glimpse into his findings from 10 years of research. Finally, as mentioned earlier, Nir and Morning Brew have partnered to co-create a 2-week workshop that dives into Nir's framework for attention and productivity and leaves you with your own toolkit for being more productive in your life and getting an hour back every single day. We included a link to the course in the comments of the live stream, but we're also going to be sending out a post-event email that includes a recording of the conversation and an exclusive link for anyone who is a Morning Brew reader to sign up for the workshop. Thank you again for everyone that joined. Hope you have a great weekend. And I could not be more excited for the course and to see so many faces that watch this in the course. Thanks, Nir, for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Alex. Great to be
Okay,
here.
take care, everyone.